At an ancient cemetery on the outskirts of New Orleans, Emma Carter and her loyal German shepherd, Shadow, entered what seemed like a night to honor the departed, but a fierce bark from Shadow unleashed a thrilling, mysterious tale of loyalty, betrayal, and secrets buried beneath the cold earth. A cryptic letter, a dark crypt, and a horrifying truth will lead Emma into a battle for justice. Are you ready to step into the maze of truth? Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment sharing where you're following from. We'd love to know which corner of the world you're joining us from. That night, a thick fog draped the ancient cemetery on the outskirts of New Orleans like a gray silk curtain. Rows of moss-covered tombstones stood silently, like mute sentinels in the darkness. The wind whistled through the brittle willow branches, carrying a chill that seeped into the skin. It was late, but Emma Carter remained there, standing before the grave of her father-in-law, Robert Hayes. Her hands tightly clutched a bouquet of white daisies, their delicate petals trembling in the breeze, as if they too sensed the unease rising within her. Emma, 32, with her brown hair tied back neatly and deep green eyes, was the picture of a strong woman torn by inner conflict. The business suit she wore was now streaked with mud, but she paid it no mind. She hadn't come here just to honor Robert, the man who had once been the pillar of their family, a powerful real estate tycoon, but to seek answers. His sudden death a year ago, ruled an accident, had never stopped gnawing at her suspicions. And tonight, something in the oppressive air of the cemetery made her chest tighten. Beside Emma, Shadow, her German shepherd with glossy black fur and eyes sharp as blades, suddenly growled. His ears stood erect, his body taut like an arrow ready to fly. Shadow was Robert's final legacy, a dog he had raised from a pup, loyal to an almost spiritual degree. Emma crouched down, placing a hand on his head, whispering, "Easy, Shadow. What's wrong?" But her voice trembled, unable to mask her growing anxiety. Then, as if guided by an invisible force, Shadow bolted toward the base of the tombstone. He barked furiously, his claws tearing into the damp earth, flinging clumps of dark soil into the air. His eyes locked onto an unseen point beneath the ground, his gaze both ferocious and desperate. Emma's heart pounded. She knelt, trying to pull Shadow back, but he growled, his gleaming white teeth flashing in the darkness. "Shadow, stop!" she shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the wind. From the fog, a figure emerged slowly. It was Hank, the cemetery caretaker. The gaunt old man with silver hair had a face as weathered as if carved from stone. His eyes glinted beneath the brim of his worn baseball cap, betraying a barely concealed panic. "Miss Carter," his voice rasped, as if the words were forced out with effort. "Don't let that dog mess with the grave. This is a place for the dead. You gotta respect him." Emma stood tall, struggling to stay composed, but Hank's words only deepened her suspicions. "Shadow never acts like this, Hank," she said, her voice icy. "He knows something. What's under this grave that you don't want me to find out?" Hank took a step back, his gnarled hands gripping his walking stick tightly. "Don't ask questions you shouldn't, girl," he muttered, his eyes darting away. "Leave now, before things get worse." But the tremor in his voice, the way he glanced at the grave as if it hid a terrible secret, only fueled Emma's resolve. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket, her fingers swiftly navigating the screen. "Jim, can you come to the cemetery right now?" she said when her close friend, Detective Captain Jim Sullivan, picked up. "Something's not right here. I need you." Less than 20 minutes later, the headlights of a police car sliced through the fog, illuminating a corner of the cemetery. Jim Sullivan stepped out, tall and imposing, with disheveled black hair and the sharp eyes of someone accustomed to facing danger. His slightly wrinkled suit and crooked tie betrayed his hurried departure from the office. "Emma, what's going on?" he asked, his deep voice carrying authority. Emma pointed toward Shadow, who was still relentlessly digging at the earth. "Shadow found something under my father-in-law's grave. This isn't normal, Jim. And Hank." She glanced at the caretaker, now standing at a distance, half hidden behind a tombstone. "He's hiding something." Jim approached the grave, observing Shadow. He knelt, running his hand over the damp soil, sensing an odd disturbance. "Dogs don't act without reason," he said, his voice low. "Shadow's trying to tell us something." He looked up, locking eyes with Hank. "What do you know about this grave, Hank? Talk before I have to make this official." Hank shook his head, his lips pressed tight. "I just do my job, keeping this place in order. Don't dig anything up. You'll regret it." But his voice cracked as if he were fighting to hold back a secret. Jim stood, his gaze unwavering. "Emma, are you sure you want to do this? If we dig up this grave, there's no going back." Emma took a deep breath, a chill running down her spine. She looked into Shadow's loyal eyes, then at the tombstone engraved with Robert Hayes' name. A powerful instinct surged within her, that the truth about her father-in-law's death lay beneath this earth, and she couldn't turn away. "I need to know, Jim," she said, her voice resolute. "Whatever the truth is, I have to face it." Jim nodded and retrieved a shovel from his car. "All right, I'll take responsibility as a cop. But if anything's off, Emma, you have to promise to let me handle it." Hank stepped forward, trying to intervene. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice breaking. "There are things you shouldn't touch." But Jim shot him a glare, and Hank retreated, his gaunt figure fading into the fog. As the first shovel blade sank into the earth, Shadow stopped barking. He sat down, his piercing eyes tracking each scoop of dirt, as if he knew the secret was about to be uncovered. Emma stood nearby, her heart pounding, unaware that this decision would lead her into a labyrinth of horrifying truths, where greed, betrayal, and deadly secrets awaited. The damp black soil beneath Robert Hayes' tombstone gradually gave way, each of Jim Sullivan's shovel strikes echoing steadily in the silent night. The metallic scrape against the earth mingled with Emma Carter's heavy breaths and the wind whistling through the willow branches. The New Orleans cemetery, with the eerie silhouettes of ancient graves, seemed to watch them, as if it too were guarding a secret it refused to relinquish. Emma stood close by, her hands gripping the now wilted bouquet of daisies, her eyes fixed on the deepening hole. Shadow, the German shepherd, sat motionless, his piercing eyes tracking Jim's every move. His stillness was now more unsettling than his earlier ferocious barking, as if he knew a fateful moment was approaching. Hank, the cemetery caretaker, lingered at a distance, his gaunt figure shrouded in fog, but Emma could feel his panicked gaze clinging to them. Thud! The shovel struck something hard, the sharp sound slicing through the air. Jim paused, kneeling to brush away the dirt. An old, rust-covered metal box emerged under the faint glow of his flashlight. It was small, about the size of a shoebox, secured with a heavy steel padlock, as if designed to protect something never meant to see the light of day. Emma's heart pounded, blood rushing to her temples. "Jim, what is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. Jim didn't answer immediately. He carefully lifted the box and set it on the ground. Its cold, metallic surface was etched with scratches, as if it had been buried for years. "Only one way to find out," he said, his voice low but tinged with tension. He glanced at Emma, as if seeking confirmation she was ready. Emma nodded, though her hands shook. "Open it, Jim. I need to know." Hank suddenly lunged forward from the shadows, his voice cracking with panic. "Don't! You don't understand! That thing shouldn't be opened!" He reached out as if to snatch the box, but Shadow growled instantly, his gleaming white teeth bared, forcing Hank to stagger back, his face ashen. "Hank, if you know something, spit it out now," Jim said coldly, his hand still on the box. "Otherwise, stay put." Hank muttered something incoherent, his lips trembling, then turned away, as if unable to bear the scene unfolding before him. Emma watched him, a chill creeping down her spine. Hank wasn't just afraid. He was hiding something, and it was tied to this box. Jim pulled a small lock-picking kit from his pocket, his practiced fingers working swiftly. After a few tense minutes, click, the lock snapped open. Emma held her breath, feeling as though the world had narrowed to the confines of that box. Jim slowly lifted the lid, the flashlight beam revealing 3 items inside: a neatly folded handwritten letter, a black USB drive, and a metal key with a strange symbol, a deeply etched spiral, like the emblem of a secret organization. Emma knelt, her trembling hand picking up the letter. The firm, familiar handwriting of Robert Hayes stood out starkly on the yellowed paper. She read aloud, her voice catching, "If you're reading this, I was murdered. My death was no accident. Be careful, Emma. The traitor is closer than you think. All the evidence is on the USB. The key will lead you to the truth. I trust you." The final words struck Emma like a dagger to the heart. Her mind reeled, her breath coming in short gasps. Robert, the father-in-law she deeply respected, didn't die in an accident. He was murdered, and the traitor. Who could it be? An image of Michael, her husband, heir to Robert's vast real estate empire, flashed through her mind. No, it couldn't be, she told herself, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Jim held the USB, his eyes sharp. "We need to check this immediately," he said, his voice resolute. He carefully tucked the USB and key into his pocket, then turned to Emma. "You okay?" Emma didn't answer right away. She clutched the letter, feeling as though Robert's spirit lingered somewhere in the fog, watching her, waiting for her to act. I don't know," she whispered, "but if he was killed, I have to find the truth, no matter how much it hurts." Suddenly, Shadow sprang to his feet, barking ferociously. He bolted toward another grave a few meters away, one without a name or date on its headstone. The soil on the grave looked fresh, as if recently disturbed. Shadow clawed at the earth frantically, his eyes blazing, as if driven by a supernatural instinct. Emma and Jim exchanged a glance. "He's found something else," Jim said, his voice low but decisive. He strode toward the grave, shovel still gripped tightly in his hand. Hank shouted abruptly, his voice breaking with fear. "Don't! You'll ruin everything! This cemetery, it's not just a burial ground." He staggered, as if on the verge of collapse. "I've seen them. Strangers at night. They come here, doing things no one should know about." Emma spun around, her eyes icy. "Strangers? Who are you talking about, Hank? What do you know about my father-in-law's death?" But Hank only shook his head, his sunken eyes haunted. I can't say. He backed away, his figure fading into the fog, leaving Emma and Jim with unanswered questions. Jim placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, his voice steady. "If Shadow believes there's something under this grave, we have to find out. You ready?" Emma looked into Shadow's loyal eyes, then at the nameless headstone. A surge of electricity coursed through her, a mix of fear and determination. "Dig, Jim," she said, her voice firm. "Whatever it is, we have to face it." As the shovel blade sank into the earth once more, Shadow's barks echoed through the cemetery, a warning that they were stepping into a labyrinth of deadly secrets. The metal box was only the beginning, and a horrifying truth awaited them beneath the cold ground. The soil beneath the unmarked grave was steadily unearthed, each of Jim Sullivan's shovel strikes resounding like the heartbeat of someone facing their fate. The New Orleans cemetery was engulfed in thick fog, the ghostly shapes of ancient tombstones whispering warnings. Emma Carter stood nearby, her breath mingling with the icy air, her deep green eyes locked on the deepening hole. Shadow, the German shepherd, had stopped barking. He stood still, ears erect, his piercing gaze seeming to peer through the earth to a horrifying secret. Hank, the cemetery caretaker, had vanished into the darkness, but his panicked words still haunted Emma. "This cemetery, it's not just a burial ground." She clutched Robert Hayes' letter, its sharp words burning into her palm. "The traitor is closer than you think." The warning tightened her chest, and the image of Michael, her husband, flickered through her mind like a shadow of doubt. Thud! The shovel hit a hard surface, the metallic clang sharp and chilling, startling Emma. Jim knelt, brushing away the dirt to reveal a rusted metal hatch, the size of a small door. At its center was an old lock, perfectly matched to the mysterious key they'd found in the metal box. Emma's pulse raced, her breath quickening. "Jim, what is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. Jim didn't answer immediately. He touched the hatch, the cold metal seeping through his skin. "Only one way to find out," he said, his voice low but laced with tension. He retrieved the key from his pocket, its strange spiral symbol glinting under the flashlight's beam, like the mark of a hidden force. As he inserted the key into the lock, a dry click echoed, and the hatch shuddered slightly, as if freed after years of captivity. Emma held her breath, her heart pounding. Jim slowly lifted the hatch, revealing a rusted iron staircase descending into deep darkness. A cold gust, carrying the scent of damp earth and metal, wafted up from below, making her shiver. Shadow growled but didn't charge down. He stood still, eyes fixed on the darkness, as if awaiting a signal. "Emma, you sure about this?" Jim asked, his sharp gaze meeting hers. "Once we go down there, there's no turning back." Emma took a deep breath, feeling the world narrow to the mouth of the hatch. Robert's letter, the USB, the key, all had led her to this moment. "I have to know the truth, Jim," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "No matter how terrible it is." Jim nodded, switched on his flashlight, and descended the staircase, each step clanging with piercing metallic echoes. Emma followed, Shadow close at her side, his claws clicking lightly on the steps. As they ventured deeper, the darkness seemed to swallow the light, leaving only the faint beam of Jim's flashlight. The staircase led to a long underground corridor, its stone walls covered in green moss and spiderweb-like cracks. The air was heavy, suffocating, as if the place itself sought to choke the life from them. The corridor opened into a wide, shadowy chamber. The flashlight's beam swept across rows of old metal filing cabinets, coated in dust. In a corner, several empty wooden coffins lay scattered, their lids flung open, as if never meant for burial. On the walls, handwritten notes and complex diagrams were pinned with a bold heading underlined, "Legacy Protocol, Phase 1. A jolt ran through Emma's body. "Legacy Protocol," she murmured, recalling the USB's contents. She approached a filing cabinet and pulled open a drawer. Inside were stacks of documents, photographs, and contracts, all tied to powerful New Orleans families. One photo stopped her cold. Robert Hayes, with his familiar smile, standing beside a tall, gaunt man in a black suit. Beneath it, handwritten, "Legacy Protocol, Phase 1. Target, Robert Hayes." "Jim, look at this," Emma called, her voice shaking. Jim stepped over, his eyes darkening as he scanned the documents. "This isn't just a conspiracy," he said, his voice low. "They targeted Robert, and maybe your whole family. Legacy Protocol is a scheme to manipulate wealthy families, controlling their assets. Robert was a target, and his death was staged." Emma's head spun. Robert wasn't just killed, he was experimented on, turned into prey in a sick game of power. She flipped through more documents, finding a detailed report on Robert's surveillance and slow poisoning, all orchestrated to let Michael, his son, seize control of the empire. Michael's name appeared repeatedly, each mention a dagger to her heart. "No, it can't be," she whispered, but the seed of doubt had sprouted into real fear. Suddenly, Shadow barked fiercely, charging toward a steel door at the far end of the room. The door was sealed with an electronic keypad, its screen flickering with cold blue light. Emma and Jim rushed over, hearts pounding. "The USB," Jim said, pulling it from his pocket. He inserted it into a slot beside the keypad, and the screen lit up. A video began to play, revealing Robert Hayes seated in a dim room, his face gaunt, but his eyes still sharp. "Emma, if you're seeing this, I hope it's not too late." Robert's voice was low, laced with pain. "I was betrayed, not just by enemies, but by my own flesh and blood. Michael, he sold me out for power, but he's just a puppet. A greater force is behind this, and they won't stop. Be careful, Emma. The truth is right in front of you." The video ended, leaving Emma stunned. Michael, the man she loved, the man she trusted, was the traitor? It felt as though the ground beneath her had collapsed. But before she could process it, a sharp tick-tick sound pierced the silence from a corner of the room. Jim swept his flashlight across, and both froze as they spotted a metal device mounted on the wall, its screen counting down. 2:59. 2:58. "Bomb!" Jim shouted, rushing to the device. He pried open its cover, revealing a tangle of wires. "Emma, get back!" Emma clung tightly to Shadow, her heart pounding. "Jim, can you do this?" she asked, her voice laced with panic. "I'm not sure," Jim replied, sweat streaming down his forehead. "But I have to try." His fingers moved swiftly, but each passing second felt like a hammer striking Emma's chest. Shadow growled, as if sensing the imminent danger. 10 seconds left. Jim hesitated between two wires, red and blue. "Red or blue, damn it," he muttered. With a reckless decision, he cut the red wire. The tick-tick stopped, and the room fell into deafening silence. Emma gasped, feeling as though she'd been pulled back from the edge of an abyss. But their relief was fleeting. A deafening explosion roared from the corridor, shaking the chamber. Dust and debris flew everywhere, and part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the exit. Jim yanked Emma and Shadow back, his eyes darkening. Someone's trying to erase evidence, he said, his voice cold as steel. And they know we're here? Emma gripped Robert's letter tightly, feeling her blood boil. The truth about her father-in-law's death, Michael's betrayal, and the legacy protocol was unraveling, but at the cost of a fight for their lives. She looked into Shadow's loyal eyes, then at Jim. "We have to get out," she said, her voice resolute, "and we have to stop whoever's behind this." In the darkness of the chamber, Shadow's growl echoed, a promise that they would not stop, no matter the dangers that lay ahead. The dust from the explosion in the secret chamber still hung in the air, clinging to the stifling atmosphere like a reminder of the imminent danger. Emma Carter held Shadow, the German shepherd, tightly, feeling the warmth of his glossy black fur as an anchor amidst the storm of emotions. Her green eyes, now sharp and resolute, locked onto Jim Sullivan, who was inspecting the blocked exit, obstructed by a pile of rubble. The crunch of broken stone under his boots echoed in the darkness, blending with Emma's racing heartbeat. Robert Hayes' video, with its warning of Michael's betrayal, haunted her, like a knife twisting deep in her heart. "We have to find a way out," Jim said, his voice low but resolute. He swept his flashlight over the debris, its faint beam illuminating shattered stone fragments. "But someone knows we're here, Emma. They won't let us escape easily." Emma nodded, gripping Robert's letter tightly. His words, "The traitor is closer than you think," burned into her palm. Michael, her husband, the man she once trusted above all, was now a name shrouded in suspicion. Yet deep down, she clung to the hope of an explanation, a different truth. "Jim, if Michael really betrayed Dad, I need to hear it from his own mouth," she whispered, her voice faltering but not weak. Shadow growled softly as if in agreement. He stood, sniffing the air, then bolted toward a corner of the chamber where a narrow gap in the rubble was visible. Jim and Emma hurried after him, using their hands and the shovel to clear the stones. After several tense minutes, they opened a small passage, just wide enough to crawl through. Faint light from the cemetery above filtered down, carrying the chill of the New Orleans night. Emma felt as though she had emerged from hell, but she knew the real battle was only beginning. 2 days later, the flash of cameras and the murmurs of the crowd filled the opulent auditorium of the Hayes Corporation. Michael Hayes, tall with meticulously styled blonde hair and a confident smile, stood at the podium. His navy suit hugged his frame, but a flicker of tension crossed his eyes as he faced the reporters. "My father's death was a tragic accident," he said, his voice smooth as a politician's. "Baseless rumors are tarnishing our family's reputation. I ask everyone to respect the truth and let him rest in peace." Emma stood in the shadows at the edge of the auditorium, her heart pounding. Dressed in a black coat, she hid her trembling hands clutching the USB containing Robert's video. Shadow sat at her feet, his piercing eyes locked on Michael, as if he could see through to his soul. Jim stood beside her, his hand ready on the concealed gun in his coat. "You ready?" he whispered. Emma took a deep breath, feeling as though she were stepping onto a gallows. "I don't have a choice, Jim," she replied, her voice resolute. "If Michael's the traitor, I need him to admit it in front of everyone." She stepped out of the shadows, striding toward the podium. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on her. Michael froze, his smile stiffening. "Emma?" he said, a trace of panic in his voice. What are you doing?" Emma didn't respond. She held up the USB, its black surface gleaming under the chandelier's light. "I have something everyone needs to see," she said, her voice echoing through the auditorium. She plugged the USB into the projector, and the large screen behind Michael lit up. Robert Hayes appeared, gaunt but commanding, his deep voice resonating through the speakers. "Michael, my son, sold me out for power," Robert said, his gaze seeming to pierce through the screen. "He worked with a secret organization to kill me and seize the corporation. But he's just a puppet. The truth is in your hands. Don't let evil prevail." The auditorium erupted in gasps and murmurs. Reporters scrambled to record, cameras flashing relentlessly. Michael's face turned ashen, his hands gripping the podium tightly. "This is fake!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "Emma, you're destroying our family. Who put you up to this?" Emma stepped closer, her eyes like daggers. "No one made me do anything, Michael," she said, her voice icy. "I found Dad's letter. I saw what you did. Tell the truth right now, or I'll release every document on this USB. Michael staggered back, sweat rolling down his forehead. You don't understand, he muttered, but his eyes, panicked, desperate, betrayed him. The crowd held its breath, waiting. Shadow growled, his claws scraping lightly on the floor, ready to pounce. Then, from the auditorium speakers, a deep voice cut through the tension. Enough, Michael. The game is over. The crowd turned, and Emma's heart stopped as a figure emerged from the back door. Robert Hayes, her father-in-law, whom she thought was dead, stood there, very much alive. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp as they swept the room. The crowd exploded in shouts and camera flashes. Dad, you're alive, Michael stammered, stumbling back as if he'd seen a ghost. He collapsed to the floor, clutching his head. No, it's impossible. Robert advanced, each step like a hammer striking Michael's deceit. I didn't die, Michael, he said, his voice cold as steel. I was held in that chamber beneath the cemetery by the very people you allied with. But one of your former allies betrayed you, saving me at the last moment. You failed. Emma's head spun. The joy of seeing Robert alive mingled with the pain of Michael's betrayal laid bare. She turned to him, her voice choked. Why didn't you tell me? I thought... Robert placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze softening. I didn't want to drag you into danger, Emma, but you uncovered the truth, as I always believed you would. The crowd was still in chaos, but Jim stepped forward, raising a hand for silence. One final question, he said, his sharp eyes on Robert. Who's behind it all? Who was pulling Michael's strings? Robert paused, then pulled a photograph from his pocket. It was the stranger from the picture Emma found in the chamber, tall, gaunt, in a black suit. Charles Langley, Robert said, his voice low. My former partner. He left the corporation over disagreements, but secretly built the legacy protocol to manipulate wealthy families. He exploited Michael's greed, turning him into a puppet to seize control of the company. A jolt ran through Emma. Charles Langley, a name like a specter, lurking in the shadows, orchestrating everything. She looked at Michael, now being handcuffed by police, his eyes vacant, a man who had lost everything. Langley, she murmured, he's still out there. Robert nodded, his gaze darkening. He's a venomous snake, Emma, but thanks to you, we've cut off his tail. The fight isn't over, but we have a chance. As Michael was led away, Emma stood motionless, shadow pressing close to her side. She felt Robert's gentle touch, a promise that they would keep fighting. But deep down, she knew Charles Langley, the true mastermind, was still out there, biding his time for a counterstrike.